future philanthropists, we are going to look at how to use keys to animate objects. So what I have right here is a main file that has my frame. I've already added over my secondary file that's going to hold all of my paint components. This process is going to be very similar to what we did before when we just had them moving around and animating, but this time we are going to be able to control that using keys. So let me just show you what I have right now. When I run this, I am just going to get a blue square up in the right hand or left hand corner. So now I want to be able to, using my keys, my up, down, left, and right, control the location of this box. So let's get into it. The first thing that we are going to do over here is actually add in a new import. That import is going to be similar to when we added in our active listener, but we are not looking for an event in the same regard that we were. Before, we were looking at changes in times using a timer. Today, we are going to be looking at key presses. So I'm going to do .all for all events. And what I am going to then do is how we had our active listener over here implemented. We are going to implement, and this implements key listener. So key listener will look for whether or not we have a press, a type, or release on our key. When we add this, we are going to get an error because we need to have those programs in place of what happens if we press a key, type a key, or release a key. So I'm going to add in all of those right now. So we are going to say that this is public and it is a void. So public void, and then our first one that we are actually going to use is our key pressed. The other ones we are not going to use, but we still need to have them. And it takes an argument of a key event. So it is looking for actual key presses, and that's E. So I will open this up and close it. Now the other two that we use, I am going to make those, but they're very, very small. So I am going to command copy. And in order to save space, I am going to size them up just so they're there, but they're not really there. There we go. Cool. And this, we now have to name this as key released, and this one is key typed. All right, so inside of this, we are going to keep what happens if we have a key pressed. Now, before we get into that, I want to add some things about what we want to change when a key is pressed. So if we are looking at this, woo, thank you, cool. So if we're looking at this, I want to change my X and Y values. I'm not changing the shape or anything, just the X and Y values of this. So I'm gonna have my X, I'll have my Y. I am going to set this as integer X, or integer X is equal to, we are just going to keep that at 0 right now. So we'll still stop and start in that top corner. Then we'll have our integer Y is also equal to 0. Cool. So before we had to input a timer and everything like that, we don't have to do this here. We are just going to be using our X and Y, and we're going to change those. So let's see, and let's tell them what happens when we have these keys pressed. In order to do that, you can condense this, but I'm going to do this in a little bit longer of a step just because I find it a little bit easier to work with. I am going to make methods for what happens with each of my key presses. So I am going to call this first one public, void, and up. So this is going to tell us what happens when I press the up key. So when I press the up key, what I want to have happen is our Y move up. So in order to do that, we actually have to subtract from our Y. So our Y minus equals 10. Why we have to do that is because if this is our box that we're drawing and it's 500 by 500, when we subtract, we actually go closer to the 0. So when we go up on our Y, we are getting closer. Over here is 500, this is 0. Every time we subtract 10, we go up. Cool. So now after that, once we change the position, I want to repaint. So every time we change the position, going to repaint. All right, so that is the template for all of our keys. We are going to use that for down, left, and right. Nope. Cool. All right, so we're getting errors because we have repetition, so we'll go down. And for this, since we're going down, we're actually going to add 10. And then if we want to go left, we are actually going negative on our x-axis. And then if we want to go right, we are going positive on our x-axis. Cool. So now we have all of these things that are happening. So if we press our up key, we are going to run void up. If we press our down key, so we have to now map our keys over here in that if structure. So this event, it still requires an E, so this event key. So we are going to call this integer code is equal to a E dot get key code. So our e.getKeyCode is going to say, oh, you pressed an E, I'm going to store it into this key code. Or you pressed a key, I'm going to send it into this variable that we've named code. And then we are going to read that and then act whether or not that works. So we are going to say if our code is equal to our key event dot, and these are what the computer calls our keys. V key up, so virtual keyboard up. If it is equal to that, we are going to do something. And we already set that in a function, so we are just going to call that right here. Call it a function, call it a method. So we've got our V key up. All right, so that's our first if statement. Just like we did with our keys, we are going to throw this in 4 times. So now we have if V key down, we are going to run the down function. If V key left, we are going to run the left function. And if V key right, we are going to run the right function. All right, so we have everything that we need to set up for our keyboard and then what happens with this, but we need to direct our key listener where we want it to actually listen to. Just like we did with our actual just moving animation on its own, we have to set a this. Inside of a new method, we are going to set up our key listener. So I'm going to call this method public, and then the name of our program, key animation. We are not returning anything. It is not anything too crazy with it. So I'm going to throw this here and then throw it there. This one is automatically generated in our template. We use it sometimes we don't. So we want to add our key listener to this. So we're gonna add key listener. And that we want to say, look at this. This is our key listener. It's now in our program. We implemented it, it's now here. Then we want to use this code that is called set focusable, which now means that not only do we have our key listener watching, but our program is going to let it watch because it is now focusable. We can look at it. And then the last thing that we're going to do, and this is kind of an optional one, set focus traversal key. Keys enabled. So sometimes your computer, if you're working on like a laptop or you have a different keyboard, sometimes keys act differently and weird, and this one kind of counter out that and just says what your key presses should be what your key does. So we have already added all of that in there. I've added my key over here. We should be able to compile this. Oh, yeah, so I typed that wrong. It is set focus traversal keys enabled. Set focus traversal keys enabled false. Can't find method. Oh boy, it was going all so good up until this point. Well, like I said, it's an optional step, so there's me being safe. We're gonna combine all of those, and now I'm going to run this. So I've got my shape right here. Whoa, it's updating, look at that. We've got a shape that moves around using the key presses. It's pretty simple, doesn't really have to do anything too crazy outside of it, and that's it. Cool, thanks for watching, talk to you later.